Hello again, gamers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Captain, and today I'm going to be reviewing and talking about the Starfinder Alien Archive 4. So first off, I want to give a big thank you to the publisher of the Starfinder Alien Archive 4, as well as all other Starfinder products, Paizo, for sending me this copy of the Starfinder Alien Archive 4 to read and check out and review. Thank you, Paizo. Before we get into this, I do want to say I've got a ton of links in the description down below that you can check out at your leisure. There's a link to BoardGameCaptain.com, which is a good hub for all things Board Game Captain, and Lynn and I have started doing semi-regular blog posts over there, so you can head over and check that out. There's also a link to my Teespring store where you can get cool shirts like this one here that says "Buy me board games and tell me I'm pretty," as well as other shirts and mugs, etc. And there's also a link to my Patreon. If you're in a position to and would like to support the channel, you can head over to my Patreon, link in the description down below. All right, so Starfinder Alien Archive number 4. So this is part of the Alien Archive series for Starfinder. If you're not too familiar with Starfinder, this is the equivalent of the bestiaries from Pathfinder. So it is filled of a ton of alien species. There are some differences in regard to the way the Alien Archives work versus, say, the bestiaries from Pathfinder. So the first thing that is different with the Alien Archives versus, say, the bestiaries from Pathfinder is that there are a ton of playable races in here. There are a ton of sentient races that they have the full-on rules to be able to use them when you are making a player character. The next thing I want to talk about that is really cool is there are a ton of races in here that you can take as animal companions, and they have the rules in there for how to immediately take them as animal companions, which is really cool. And something that is really awesome in this book is there are a ton of races that have equipment that are either made from parts of them. So if you have the correct crafting skills and you defeat these monsters, you could make them yourself, or in some cases are made just inspired by them. And there are lists for their full stats of these equipment as well as prices. And the equipment can be weapons, armor, in some cases even drugs, or and they also have in some cases spells that are based on spell-like abilities of some of these creatures that are in here. All right, so without any further ado, I'm gonna get into this. I'm gonna start talking about what kind of cool stuff you can find in the Starfinder Alien Archive number 4. So to start with, you have a big overview that gives you, ideas on how to read the different entries and also how to read their stat blocks, and then they just get right into the various aliens. So the first thing when you open it up is you have the table of contents followed by an overview that tells you how to read the stat blocks of the various aliens. Then you have the aliens grouped alphabetically in groupings that are generally evenly dispersed with the number of aliens. So you have A through D, E through H, I through L, M through P, Q through R, S, because there's a lot of S's, and then T through W, and there's nothing after W in this particular one. Followed by, we have a section on species graphs, which is really interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about later. This is something new for this particular Alien Archive. It was not in any of the previous Alien Archives. And then you have the appendices, which are pretty typical. The appendices in here go over things like the abilities of the different aliens, as well as listing the aliens by challenge rating and listing the creatures by type, and also rules options, and then a listing of all the playable races that are in here. So now let's have a talk about some of the things that really stood out to me with the Starfinder Alien Archive 4 and its various entries of interesting creatures throughout. And there are a ton of very interesting creatures throughout here. So the first thing I want to talk about are some of my favorites of the playable races. There's a ton of playable races in here, but I picked out a handful of my favorites to reference. So first race I want to talk about is the Astriopi, I believe is how they are pronounced. Now the Astriopi are rather a insectile type race. They have exoskeletons and wings. They do have a fly speed, which is really cool. But the most interesting thing about them is obviously inspired by bees. They are able to make a magical honey. So their honey production can be done once per day, and the honey is used as a sort of health potion. It actually counts as a Mark III serum of healing. So this is really cool. A really cool racial ability. And these guys can be a great asset to your party if you have one character that is an Astriopi. The next one I want to talk about is the Gopoxy. Now the Gopoxy are a very interesting race that are sort of sentient humanoid coral colonies that all work together like a single entity, and they're really interesting thematically, and they have this really cool ability where they can, when they go up levels, they're allowed to retrain previous choices they have made by altering the growth patterns of their coral in their colony, which is a really interesting concept. The next group I want to talk about are the Entu. Now, the Entu are really interesting. They are another communal race making a humanoid form, but they actually have two different forms. The Entu are a intelligent fungal colony, but the Entu also have the ability to make a version of themselves where they are, instead of just being the humanoid fungal colony, they are a symbiote within another sentient species, and specifically have to be symbiote. It can't be like a parasite. This has to be a willing union of the two species, in which case they give the other species extra abilities, including possible sentience themselves if they were actually non-sentient from before they joined with the Entu. But some Entu grow up to be bipedal beings that sort of have some quasi ooze type abilities, which is pretty interesting. Or some of them will grow up and join with other races. They are very interesting, and you could actually play as either of those. Then there is the see if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Jububanan. I hope I'm pronouncing this as it was intended. Bit of a difficult word to say. Now, these guys thematically are very interesting because they're kind of like little single-legged but frog-like creatures, which is in its own really cool. They have some very interesting concepts with their society and the way they work, but they also have this very interesting ability where they can get a bonus anytime they gain rerolls. So if you gain any kind of abilities that give you rerolls, they actually get a bonus to that reroll because of their self-sufficiency, which is a really cool racial trait. I really like that one. Next, I would like to talk about the Kier Inta, I believe is how they're pronounced. They are kind of a phase species. They are small, moth-like creatures, but actually are fae, descended from beings that came into our universe from the first world. They are very interesting. They have a fly speed, very non-humanoid in their appearance, and they also have this really cool ability with a sonic attack. It's called the Reverberating Shriek, that can allow them to stagger enemies, which is a natural attack and is a very cool ability. And the last of the races I want to draw attention to that are playable, that I was a big fan of, are the Warlanisi. The Warlanisi have a ton of racial traits because they are multi-armed, they get psychic reverb, they have a lot of really cool abilities, but my favorite of their abilities is the Warlanisi Gamble, which is one time per day. They can either do it for themselves or for a ally within 15 feet of them. It's an ability that's supposed to represent the fact that this race is known to be naturally lucky somehow. But basically, when doing a skill roll or an attack or a saving throw, either them or an ally within 15 feet can roll twice and take the better of the two results, which is a really cool ability. And again, this is another race that would be a huge asset to your party to have to take one as a member of your playing party. Now, next I want to talk about a handful of my favorite races in here that you can take as a animal companion. So the first one I want to draw attention to is the Cloud Ray, which are basically like these flying alien stingrays that live in gas giant planets. You could take one as an animal companion and actually ride on it. It can be taken as a mount and an animal companion, which is really, really awesome. I'm a big fan of these. The next one after that I want to talk about are these Sun Scrapper Beetles, which are these giant heat-resistant beings that can live inside of stars. They are really kind of cool. They're listed as Dawn Beetles, but specifically there's two forms of the Dawn Beetles. You have the Dawn Sun Scrapper Beetle and the Dawn Core Driver, which is them in their more mature form. But in their smaller form, you are able to take them as an animal companion, and they're pretty tough and awesome, and are heat resistant and like to gather giant balls of junk together that they can hide in and use as armor, and you can use their ball of junk as well. Very interesting animal companion. And then the last one I want to talk about is the Ravenous Drake. Mainly just because the Ravenous Drake is a really cool draconic kind of being that can be taken as an animal companion. It actually counts as a small dragon. The domesticated version. There's a non-domesticated version that you can run into in the wild, but you could have this small wingless dragon as a pet slash animal companion. I really like that. They are really cool as well. Very fun. The Ravenous Drake. Now, next I want to talk about all the really cool types of equipment that are in here. Now, there's a ton. I'm not going to be able to go over all of them. So again, I've picked out some of my favorites, combined with, some of my favorite entries of alien creatures, along with, the really cool equipment that they provide. So the first of the alien creatures that provide a cool type of equipment I want to talk about is the Atlapoc. Now, the Atlapoc is sort of a giant alien shrimp. It really, really looks like it's a cross between sort of a trigger shrimp or maybe a mantis shrimp, which technically mantis shrimps I know are not actually shrimps, so don't anybody point that out to me in the comments. I know, but they are called mantis shrimps. So this one, its ability leans more towards the side of the trigger shrimp, which in real life trigger shrimps are able to snap and make like a shockwave to stun their prey. This creature is able to do that. It's like a giant version of that, which in itself is a really cool thing. But then in addition, there is equipment based on its ability, possibly made from parts of its shell, called snap whips, which you're able to, if you're able to use it, you can snap it, and when you do the crack, it will make a shockwave that you can use to stun your opponent, which is really awesome. And then there's, of course, all of those equipments linked. Now, the next type of creature that I want to talk about that has some very interesting equipment made from it is the Deadfall Stalker. Now, the Deadfall Stalker is a very creepy and kind of scary creature that looks like a giant sphere with a bunch of spider legs coming out of it, which in itself, is kind of the stuff of nightmares. It's this big white sphere with a mouth with a ton of like tarantula legs. That really describes it. Now, the creature is very bizarre and has a very bizarre anatomy where somehow it holds a singularity inside itself that it uses to draw creatures in that it wants to eat. It opens its mouth and reveals the gravity well and uses it to suck in creatures and somehow is able to digest them in there with the singularity that it's able to contain. Well, people have made singularity cannons based on the singularities from inside of the Deadfall Stalkers, and they have those listed here. So in addition to being a really bizarre and interesting monster, you also have this amazingly powerful new projectile weapon made from the Deadfall Stalker, and possibly a reason to go on a quest hunting these if a company were to hire you to help them obtain some of their singularities from inside them to help make some of these singularity cannons. But beware, these creatures are pretty tough. They are challenge rating 12. Next, I'm going to talk about the Grey Goo. Now, the Grey Goo entry is based on a theory that has been put forward of a possible danger of the development of nanotechnology, whereby if a virus was created that could infect nanotechnology, if there was some sort of glitch where all they would want to do is self-replicate, and not serve any other function, they could literally wipe out all life on the planet and turn the entire surface of the world into a gray goo of nanotech machines doing nothing but self-replicating. So there's an entry in here for that, and then in addition, there's an entry for nanotech used more correctly with these nanite capsules. They're kind of illegal in a lot of places, but they're kind of interesting. You can take one, not really knowing what the intended effect is, and there's a random table with some negative effects, some positive effects that the nanites can do to you once they are inside you. So it's a bit of a gamble, but it is a very interesting item. And also, I really like that they actually did the gray goo, the nanotech swarm, as it were, as a creature in the book. So the next creature and equipment combo I want to talk about is the Ignerso. The Ignerso is a giant cyclopean bear-like creature with enormously durable claws that can dig through solid rock. Very interesting monster. The Ignerso Mason, the higher level version, is a challenge rating 11. There is a smaller level version that's only a challenge rating 5. But again, this has a weapon that can be made out of the claws and scales of the Ignerso called Ignerso Knuckles. And there are many levels of Ignerso Knuckles, which can be very powerful melee weapons. Next, I want to talk about the Kion. The Kion is sort of a space Nautilus. Really interesting. I love these. I'm a big fan of the Agent Cormac series, which contained some biotech spaceships that look like big space nautiluses, or are they nautili? I don't really know what the plural of a nautilus is, but yes, they look like these, and I really dig these, and these use a lot of magnetic abilities and are able to fire these darts. There is a weapon based on these called the Cellulite Harpooners, which are these big heavy weapons that fire harpoons magnetically, like a railgun or a Gauss rifle. They fire the projectiles with magnetics rather than propellants. And then once you embed one in a creature, you can use the weapon to pull it in as if it were on a cord, but again, using the magnetics to do it. Very interesting spaceborne, aquatic-looking creature, and then also a very interesting weapon made from it. And the last one I want to talk about, another, again, very cool creature as well as cool equipment, is the Scene. Now, the Scene is this bizarre creature that seems to work on a larger than atomic scale in a similar way that subatomic particles look at, where looking at them, even with artificial means, automatically makes them change their shape. This we know that they change their shape, but we have been completely unable to see what their true form looks like. And their changed shape seems to be the stuff of nightmares, and they seem to abduct people and disappear with their victims, though nobody really knows what they do with them. If they, maybe eat them or turn them into other scenes, it is completely unknown because of their quantum nature and their mysterious nature. We are unable to communicate with them. But then, based on their quantum nature, we have been able to develop quantum fusion weapons where once in a while you are able to use the weapon to make two possible shots, see which one would hit, and then pick which one hits. It's allowed to be done 3 times per day as a standard action. Really interesting ability, really kind of cool. Basically, everyone around you would see you blur into 2 possible forms as you're shooting at 2 different targets, and then form back together into the one that actually hit the target. Really interesting ability. I really dig the quantum fusions. Okay, next I just want to talk about some of my favorite and most interesting creatures I found in this book. I just have a handful that I wanted to draw attention to. Now, the first one is just the stuff of nightmares. It is the Kuyu. So the Kuyu is a creature that disguises itself to look like some sort of fluffy, adorable creature. In the book, they picture it looking like a bunny, but it could look like any normal fluffy, adorable creature that might draw you in. You come on over to it and you're like, oh, aren't you cute? And then it grows and splits open and a pair of heads burst out from its eyes and it becomes this horrific monstrosity, literally the stuff of nightmares, and attacks you. This thing is horrifying. I love it. There's also, by the way, a piece of equipment you can draw from it, but it's kind of something that you would have to surgically graft onto yourself, and is the sort of thing that creeps me out so much I would never do, which is why I didn't make my list for my favorite bits of equipment drawn from monsters. The next thing I want to talk about is the robot, infiltration, or infiltration robot. See, the thing about this robot is it's obviously a pop culture reference and is specifically based on the Terminator. So there's 2 versions of it. There is the Monitor class infiltration robot, which is obviously based on the T-800, the model of Terminator that Arnold Schwarzenegger always played in the Terminator movies. And there is a second version called the Exterminator class infiltration robot, which is much tougher. And that one is obviously based on the liquid metal Terminator from Terminator 2. Really, really cool. I love that they did a pop culture reference to the Terminator movies, which at least the first 2 of which were good. But I love the original Terminator, and Terminator 2 was pretty good as well. These are really cool movies. Yes, I like the original Terminator better than Terminator 2. Come at me in the comments if you like. Next, moving on, there is the Ship Killer Bulb. Now, the Ship Killer Bulb is a really interesting plant life form where it is a gigantic mobile creature that grows on asteroids or even in the rings of gas giant planets. Generally not dangerous unless you jump into real space right near it. It has a tendency to get agitated by this and can possibly attack and destroy your ship. Really, really cool and interesting in possible encounter for you while on the ship. And this is another one also that had equipment based on it. It had the gravity grenade, which is based on abilities from the ship color bulb. Next, I want to talk about the fact that there are a ton of really creepy spider type creatures in here. I already talked before when I was talking about the Deadfall Stalker, which definitely had some spider imagery to it, but there are more. There's a ton of creepy spider alien monsters in here. There's the Skarak, which looks like a giant spider and can kind of act like it. It is actually a magical beast. And can be really frightening for you if you are afraid of spiders. Makes a really cool monster to have to fight. There is the Ursica, which is another spider-like creature that kind of looks like a woolly spider and lives on a planet where it hibernates through the warmer months, but then is active through the colder months and goes out and hunts people as this huge magical beast. Only vulnerable when it has to cocoon itself to hibernate in the warmer months. And then lastly, there is the Warp Stitcher, which is a giant transdimensional spider-like monster that is highly intelligent and likes to stalk people that it feels is somehow doing damage to the multiverse. And if it gets you, it will stitch you up to its body and cause like untold amounts of torment to you for who knows how long to punish you for doing damage to the multiverse. A really interesting creature. These things actually believe themselves to be guardians of the multiverse, which is very interesting, though they are lawful evil and they are large aberrations, and they are pretty much the things of nightmares. Next, I want to talk about the fact that there's a creature in here called the Eutestra. Now, while it does not look like the xenomorphs from Alien, its life cycle very much is similar to them, or similar to a lot of wasp species that do in fact exist in the real world, that also the creature from the xenomorph from Alien was based on. So this is also another thing that can be really horrifying, because if you get one of its larvae inside yourself, it could burst out and eat you, and that would be pretty terrifying. Now, there is a ton of cool stuff in here. I just want to make brief reference to the fact that there is a whole new appendix in the back with this new ability to do species graphs, where you can get graphs, either biological or mechanical, to gain the abilities of many other species. And there's full descriptions on how all these work and how much they cost to get these body parts grafted onto you. Whole big appendix back here. Really cool group of stuff. And I did want to make brief reference to the fact that there are a ton of creatures in here that also have new types of spells listed based on their spell-like abilities in here. For instance, there was one that had an ability where you could use a spell to make your weapon bypass some of your opponent's armor, which was really cool. So this is a big hardcover, very nicely produced book. Full color, glossy printing, full color on every page, old school thread binding, really well produced book, just like all of the hardcovers from Paizo or always are. This is full of tons of interesting information. So like I say, these alien archives, they do work like a bestiary from Pathfinder, but there's more in here. And there's a ton more. Again, new spells, new equipment, new creatures that you could take as animal companions, and a ton of new species with the full rules to play as a being of that species. This is really awesome. This is a really well put together book with a ton of really interesting creatures in here, either to use as enemies or NPCs, or to use as playable races, as well as a ton of new equipment in here. I really like this. I highly recommend the Alien Archive 4. Plus, again, the thing that's brand new and unique to here, which I didn't even talk too much about, is the species graphs. There's a ton of new options in there of stuff to use your money on to get you some new awesome abilities if you want to take species graphs on your character. Maybe you want to spend some of your hard-won gains that you have gotten through your campaign to give you some new awesome abilities, and that is really cool. The Starfinder Alien Archive is really pretty awesome. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 stars. I really enjoyed reading this one. If I were to be running a game of Starfinder, I would love to use this both for its options in new playable races and equipment, as well as options for new NPCs and villains for my players to run into, and monsters. So this is really awesome. I highly recommend the Starfinder Alien Archive 4. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns on this book, feel free to put them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed watching this review of a role-playing game product, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on. Cool. There are also a number of... ow. You're hurting me with your claws. You been trying to make a puppy blooper? You making a puppy blooper? What you want to do? You want to dance? We're going to dance. Yeah? How you doing? What's going on? You need attention. You need attention. Yeah. What's up? What's up? Oh, you pawed me right in the lip. Right in the lip. You can give me a fat lip. What are you doing? What's going on? Is everything okay? Yeah? Yeah? Why don't you go play with some of your toys, okay? Let me finish my video, okay? Here you go. Go ahead.